Welcome to Defeat Your Cravings, hosted by Dr. Glenn Livingston, PhD. Dr. Glenn is a clinical psychologist and former multi-million-dollar consultant to the big food industry and uses his experience to help you defeat your cravings. This show will help you to focus on dramatically reducing cravings and leaving the diet mentality behind, so you can more easily and effortlessly achieve your health, fitness, and body composition goals. Please remember, no doctor-patient relationship is created via this show, and you are responsible for confirming any changes to your diet, health, or psychological routines with an appropriately licensed professional before implementing them. Before we get started, if you haven't downloaded the free smartphone app to access dozens of these recordings all in one place, as well as to avail yourself of a confidential community for support, motivation, and assistance, please visit the podcast link on defeatyourcravings.com as soon as possible. And now, here's your host, Dr. Glenn Livingston.
Hey, it's the very good Dr. Glenn Livingston with defeatyourcravings.com. And I'm here with an encore interview with Russell, who has been working with us for quite a long time, has lost quite a lot of weight, but more importantly is someone who's really beaten the food obsession and made a permanent change. And I think that we could both say that with confidence, right, Russell?
Absolutely.
So would you like to kind of talk us through your background a little bit so that people get a sense of who you are, where you were, where you are now?
Sure. I grew up as a shy, lonely, fat kid. In our home, food really played the role of love and happiness, as well as comfort and consolation. And I just grew up thinking of food as the only pleasure I get in life. But around, I guess, age 16, my mom helped me lose all my excess weight over summer. And I kept it off for 21 years. But in all fairness, the last 19 of those 21 years were my Air Force years, 4 years of college ROTC and followed by 15 years on active duty. And you can't be fat in the military or they kick you out.
The ultimate diet.
That's right. Job security is a good motivator. But I got out of the Air Force about 1995, and then my weight went from about 200 pounds to 275. And then over the years, I'd go through periods of being faithful to regular aerobic exercise. And during those times, I'd lose the usual amount of weight, 25 or 30 pounds. I mean, one of those two numbers. And then something inside me would self-sabotage and I'd gain it all back. After some incredibly painful and stressful experiences in my family, we moved from Denver, Colorado to Waco, Texas in 2016. And then my weight went up to 300 pounds. And when I was diagnosed with sleep apnea, the written report also said morbid obesity, which really discouraged me. I had never heard those two words put together. I had to Google it. But extreme obesity ran rampant in my family. Among my parents and their families, there was heart disease. Both parents had triple bypasses, stroke, colon cancer, type 2 diabetes. I knew it was only a matter of time and I'd be next. But then around age 60, talk about fast forward, I began learning about cognitive behavior therapy and its application to eating problems and, started working on that. And when my weight loss actually exceeded 30 pounds, I said, hey, this time it looks like I'm going to go all the way. And then, Glenn, I discovered your teaching and coaching practice, I'd say around December 2019, and I read everything you wrote with profuse underlining and note-taking. And your methods, as you explain in Defeat Your Cravings, it put everything together for me. You encompassed everything I had learned so far, but added tons more. And you pretty much taught me how to move all my eating decisions from my impulses to my intelligence. So over a 2.5-year period, I lost 100 pounds.
Russell, I think that's just wonderful. I appreciate you saying that. I need to make a legal disclaimer that it would be unreasonable for you to assume that just reading the book or taking the program would cause you to lose 100 pounds. It kind of does happen. The typical user, we really focus on getting control, and they'll report that they stop overeating by a factor of 90% within the first month. That's the typical user, and they usually lose some weight to go along with that. And we have less solid data 6 months or a year down the road from there. That's what we can tell you the typical result is. But Russell, it's fantastic that you did that. I know you've kept it off for several years now. Were you going to talk to us about what actually made that possible? Where would you like to go?
Sure. And in all fairness, I'm a strong academic type, so I am a book learner, and you write well. So I was able to just take a lot of detailed notes and then notes from my notes. So it worked for me. But I probably gathered about 8 different principles from your writings that I've listed and written out. But 5 of them come to mind that were the biggest things that jumped out at me. The first of them is the psychological construct of the inner pig. Identifying the source of self-destructive eating behaviors that is in me, but it is not me, calling that the pig, and then separating the pig's desires from the desires of the real me. Yes, it's a language gimmick, a semantics trick, but it's incredibly powerful and life-changing. That was the biggest thing.
The way we accomplish that is with at least one simple rule. So if you say, I will never have chocolate during the week, then you know that any thoughts that suggest that you will are your inner pig, and any thoughts that suggest that you won't are your higher self. That's how we accomplish that. There's no magic to that. Yeah.
Exactly.
I mean, there is magic to that in terms of what it can do for you, but it's not rocket science.
Yes, but incredibly successful. Another thing too was the conventional wisdom of our day is progress, not perfection. So the idea is you don't have any high standards for yourself up front, but when you fail, your inner pig says you're a loser because you failed to be perfect. But your model, I believe, is the right one. You commit with perfection up front, then you forgive yourself with dignity whenever you stumble. That proves to be the one that makes perfect sense, and that works for me.
Could you give an example or two of how you separated from the inner pig and what it means to commit with perfection, but forgive yourself with dignity?
I can't think of specific foods, but I'd be tempted toward a particular thing. I will have written down, like you said, as soon as you have a rule in place, then the line is drawn. And then anything that suggests that you break it is the pig. And when I get that temptation, I just say, no, that's not me. That's not me. And I'm not going to do that.
Maybe an example of one of your rules?
I would say, like, for example, no more nighttime eating. Now, I do keep that perfectly well right now. After 8 p.m., no more food. The kitchen is closed. When I first implemented that rule, there would be times when I would binge at nighttime. Afterwards, I would have to deal with the fact that, yes, I stumbled, I failed, but I am not a failure. It's not who I am. It's just an instance where I messed up. And I'd forgive myself and I would press on. You need to feel a certain amount of remorse, a certain amount of guilt, which is appropriate. But it's one thing to feel guilty about behavior, but there's false guilt when you think that you yourself are a loser. My behavior was bad because I'm capable of better things than that.
Russell, what I've been telling people lately, because I've been trying to expand my ability to help people let go of neurotic guilt or stop perseverating on guilt after they make a mistake, the goal is to turn guilt into responsibility. The function of guilt is very much like the function of physical pain in the body, just to get your attention so that you don't do it again. And so if you make a mistake and you eat at 8:30 or something like that, and you step back and you say, well, what caused that? Did I not prepare for dinner early enough? Did I skip a meal before so I was a little extra hungry? What caused that? Do I need any adjustments to my rules? And then you figure out how you're going to avoid it in the future. You've turned guilt into responsibility, and it's appropriate that you let it go. Just like if you touch a hot stove and you know why you touched the hot stove and where it is, it doesn't really serve any purpose for you to say, I'm a pathetic hot stove toucher and I'm always going to do that. Turn guilt into responsibility. That's what I tell people.
Exactly. Yeah. And you just turn it into a learning experience, like example with the Olympic archer. You aim with perfection, but you may not hit the target exactly in the middle, but you analyze what you did wrong, make adjustments for the future. So you turn it into a learning experience. Life gave you a lemon, so you make lemonade. You get the benefit from that by turning it into a learning experience, and then you press on. Sure.
Exactly. Go on with the principles that work for you.
Oh, sure. So that was 2 of them. I guess a third one is this liberating truth that you don't have to fix your emotional issues before you conquer your eating problems. You can feel totally sad, unloved, depressed, and still eat well. And I wish I had learned that before I read a couple of really thick books about emotional eating, because knowing the why, it didn't do me any good at all. It really didn't. Emotions are involved in overeating, but you don't have to be emotionally fixed before you can make the right choices.
What I tell people, what we're looking to do is to sever the link between emotional discomfort and overeating. It's kind of like building a fireplace around a fire in the living room. You don't have to put out the fire, but you need to prevent the fire from getting out.
That's exactly it. I would say too that the fact that our society takes what is average, what everybody does, and they define that to be normal. But you and I know 67% of all Americans, literally 2 out of every 3, are overweight, with half of them being clinically obese. So I don't want to be, and I don't have to be other people's idea of normal. So if somebody says, well, why don't you eat normal food? It's like, I'm sorry, but I don't want to be normal by that definition.
Exactly. Normal is sick in our society, unfortunately.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. One other one that's a biggie for me is the realization that you can transform your mind and therefore your body. Your beliefs, your desires, and your taste buds can be changed. It only takes, as you've pointed out, maybe 6 to 8 weeks for your taste buds to adapt to change, where you stop craving a particular junk food or pig slop and you enjoy healthy food in its place. To me, that's a life-changing truth that unhealthy cravings are not forever.
The pig says you're going to be tortured forever.
Yeah, no way. Yeah. I think you pointed this out, Glenn, that the brain is an efficient organ. And if you keep saying to it over 6, 8 week period, no, every time the pig demands something, you say, sorry, you're not going to get it. It eventually figures out that this is a waste of energy to keep pounding on the door when it's not going to open. The craving does go extinct. Between you and me and the fence post, well, obviously it's you and me and a whole lot of other people, but there are times when I will walk through Walmart and I'll look behind me and in front of me, and if there's no one around, when I'm walking in the candy aisle just for fun, I will look at all of the different candy and I will literally laugh out loud. Make sure no one hears me, but it's just fun to look at all that stuff that I used to put in my body, and now I'm laughing at it, and getting a kick out of it because it's not a part of my life anymore.
You've taught your brain that all those colors and packaging, and well, there's no smells for the packaged goods, but all the colors and packaging and brand logos, that they no longer signal the availability of excessive calories and fat and salt. You've taught your brain that. And so now it just looks like some kid did a lot of coloring. It used to get you to put stuff on your body, but it doesn't anymore.
Back in the day, growing up, that was my only source of pleasure. And, it's like I don't need for my taste buds to hit their bliss points. I don't need that. Now I eat for nourishment, and I love the taste of whole natural foods, which we're meant to do. Since I've gotten rid of all these other sweets and everything, a Honeycrisp apple is delicious to me. But what I would say is, when your body loses fat and gains muscle strength and tone, you are literally opting out of preventable sicknesses, diseases, pain, ailments, mobility problems, even a premature death. And I like to say, instead of an emphasis on health insurance, you now have health assurance.
Oh, health assurance. Yes,
Yeah,
yes, yes,
yeah.
yes.
It's really true, even for security in your older years, knowing that you're always going to be able to work, or at least when it comes to being free from preventable problems.
I just want to go back to one thing you said, just to highlight it, because the last few weeks I've been talking to the absolute most successful people. And something that's a pattern that I hadn't heard before was they're really focusing on the word nourish. So, for example, rather than asking themselves, what am I going to eat? They ask themselves, how am I going to nourish myself? I just heard you say something very similar, so I wanted to highlight that pattern. I think it's a real success pattern.
Yeah, I think so too. And I think one of the reasons I avoid most restaurants, my favorite one was a place where you just can get salads and soup, and then that place closed. And it's like, that's the story of my life. Whatever I really like closes down or they quit making it. But, it's like they want customers. So the emphasis is on taste bud pleasure, on flavor, and the nutritional quality may or may not be there. And that just really ticks me off. So, my wife likes to eat at restaurants. So I'll give in on periodically, because I don't want to be totally selfish, but I can get something there that's not bad. I just avoid it. But I want to tell you, as a Christian teacher, I have found that all of the principles you teach in Defeat Your Cravings, and I've noted 8 of them myself, are thoroughly biblical. I actually wrote a paper documenting the scriptural support for those principles, all of them. And I'm actually going to be teaching these things at my church, hopefully in the spring, and helping other people learn what I've learned and hopefully find the same kind of freedom.
I would love you to come back sometime and talk about all that.
Sure, love to.
Okay, I'd love to do that. So I understand you also have something you call your three pillars of success. You want to share that?
Absolutely. I think the first thing of all, and this refers to the cognitive behavioral therapy. I hate to use something sounding so psychological and all, because really it's just what I would call being transformed by a renewed mind. But it's affirmations that are both defensive and offensive. And defensively, I would write down what you and I call our pig squeals, lies that I've believed about myself and my relationship with food, followed by my responses, truths that refute those lies. So I would actually write those down. And the same thing on the offensive, positive affirmations that I declare and I confess, things that are either true right now or they're becoming true or I want to see true. And these also include, by the way, my big why, the list of reasons that we write down as to why we want to lose weight and be healthy. And I would actually write all these things down on 3x5 index cards, and I would review them continually, daily, until I got to a point where I just maybe did it weekly. I would read them aloud and with emotions. And when I was 300 pounds and I said, I am a lean, athletic man, I made sure that no one could hear me because they would laugh me right out of the room. But I just kept confessing that. And over time, these things really renewed my mind and my character to change me into a person without eating problems, as rewiring my brain. And it really changed.
Did I ever tell you that I used to have an affirmation that said I'm a lean, clean, mean Marine?
Yes, I love
I
that.
told you that before. Okay. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. No offense, but I was in the Air Force. I did a lot of purple suitor work where you had guys from different branches of the service get together.
I was not actually in the Marines. My dad was in the Army, but I was not actually in the Marines. It's just a saying that got me motivated to be disciplined and goal oriented.
Sure, absolutely. We just had a lot of fun giving each other a hard time.
Yeah. What are the other pillars?
Well, the affirmations is the first one. The second one is my food plan, aka my food rules or pre-made decisions. As you talk about, Glenn, willpower is a fatigable muscle, and the more the day wears on and the more decisions you make, the weaker it gets. But you have your rules that you make, a sacred plan that's a promise to yourself, then is a non-decision when it comes to your pig saying, well, you should do this or that, and it goes against your food plan. You say, no, I'm not doing that. It just gives you the power to eat by design and not by impulse. Some examples, I only have whole natural foods, not processed foods, because natural foods satisfy the body and the appetite, and no more foods with man-made chemicals, artificial ingredients, or unnaturally high concentrations of sugar, fat, salt, starch, and so on, because these things are engineered to overstimulate the taste buds while being addictive and non-nutritious, fattening, toxic, and disease-causing. And I just got to a place of disgust where I said, I'm done with that. But as I look at that, that's on version 15 of my food plan, version 15. So it evolved over a 2.5 year period. So, because if somebody hears me say that, they're like, oh, you got to be kidding me. Well, you don't necessarily make a decision that rash overnight, but over time, it kind of grows on you and you find yourself wanting less and less processed stuff. It just changed over time.
The longer that you eat clean, the more clean you want to eat. But what you have to be careful with for the listeners is that people are eating the average amount of processed food. Then the idea of just eating a whole lot more fruit and vegetables or lean meats or something, it doesn't sound appealing at all. And your inner pig will tell you that there's no way that you could do it. And that's why we usually start people with one simple rule, often a rule that doesn't restrict food whatsoever. Often it's more like, I'll never go back for seconds, or I'll always put my fork down between bites.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like you said, it's something where everybody has to define for himself what pig slop is and what he'll never eat again. And you can't judge another person's food plan, and I never would. I just know for myself that this is just something that grew on me over time. And I think the big thing is, like you said, the more clean you eat, the more clean you want to eat. So you're not doing something unnatural. You're doing what you genuinely desire. I just don't want hyperstimulated taste buds and unnatural concentrations of sugar and fat and stuff like that. And another thing, by the way, Glenn, in one of your writings that really was a gigantic thing for me is no more nighttime eating. And so I would say at 8 p.m., I would slap my hands together and say, kitchen is closed, and that's it. That was a powerful rule for me. My weight had plateaued and I was still overweight, but I started implementing that rule. It was a giant growth spurt at that point as far as losing weight and getting healthier. So
Beautiful. What was the third pillar?
the third one is this idea of continually making small, incremental, yet permanent lifestyle changes. Examples, dietary changes, continual tweaks in my food plan, adding foods, removing them, changing portion sizes. And it's important to note that even though I use the word calories to refer to amount of food energy, I never counted calories ever. Instead, whenever my weight would plateau, I just make substitutions or cutbacks. And the beauty of that is I knew I wasn't being deprived, because when my weight plateaued at a level that was still overweight for me, I knew my body was getting more food than it needed. So making a cutback, it didn't feel like I was missing out or anything. And then also for exercise changes, adding, modifying body weight exercises. I love body weight exercise. It seems like it's true athleticism, both cardio and strength training. But I feel like exercise as a permanent way of life is an absolute necessity. It's crucial to avoid and reverse the loss of lean body mass as we age, because if you don't exercise and keep up the strength and tone, as you know, we lose maybe about half a pound of lean weight per year, and your body composition changes. You lose muscle weight, and then you're eating the same amount of calories, so it gets stored as fat. It just sets you up for all these diseases and stuff like that. So I've made a lifetime commitment to my food plan and exercise plan. I feel like they need to be a permanent way of life. And the key was transitioning my lifestyle, growing out of old habits and into new ones until it's like I became a whole new person. And if you continually introduce changes that are small and gradual, not large and drastic, it makes it easier for the brain and body to adapt to them and make them permanent. And it is absolutely worth the time it takes, because it means good health for the rest of your life. It really does.
There's a concept called the just noticeable difference. Sometimes if people can't deal with making some major change to some food that's really dogging them, like let's say somebody's having 4 pieces of pizza a day for dinner, right? And they just feel like it's too much, but they don't want to say they're not going to have pizza again. And they don't want to jump right down to having only 1 slice for dinner or 2 slices for dinner. I'll ask them, well, what's the smallest amount you could take away that you would just barely notice? And maybe they'll say, so I'll have 3 3/4 slices. Just kind of clip the tip off of the fourth slice. They'll say, okay, why don't you do that this week? And then we'll ask them the same question again, and they'll say, well, I can go down to 3 1/3. I say, okay, right? And before you know it, you get a little motivation and you say, I really didn't notice that. I really, really didn't notice that. And I can get down to where I need to be. So I think that's what you're describing here.
If you're used to drinking whole milk and then you drink skim milk, just as an example, I don't drink cow's milk anymore, but if I did, going from whole milk to skim milk is like drinking white water. If it's a gradual transition, then you just don't hardly notice it. So I know exactly what you mean. Just by being gradual, the brain and the body can adapt, and then you can make the changes permanent.
Then you had your motivation to persevere. Russell sent me an outline of things he really wanted to talk about, so I'm helping him go through that.
Oh, yeah.
Tell me, how do you stay motivated to persevere?
I lost about 110 pounds, and I knew that it was going to be rugged and it was going to take some time, and you really have to pace yourself, and you have to give up instant gratification. So there's a handful of things, and they're pretty much things that became affirmations to me. One of them is a saying, a lapse is not a relapse. And I personally define a lapse as an individual slip up, whereas a relapse is the total backsliding into a former bad habit or lifestyle. Just because I messed up does not mean I might as well give up. Mistakes are human, they're part of learning, but I need to focus on what I've been doing right and develop a success identity. I may have just had an instance of failing, but I am not a failure. Like you said, Glenn, just because I ate 5 Oreo cookies, well, since I blew it, I might as well eat the whole box. What logic is there in that? Like, oh, I chipped a tooth, so I might as well take a hammer and break all of my teeth. It's like, why would you do that?
Exactly.
Yeah. So that was one thing. Another thing would be reviewing my big why, those reasons that motivate us, why we're doing what we're doing, losing weight and working out and getting a healthier body. There's another affirmation that This is one of those things that I would read out loud, and it's a couple sentences, but it's this affirmation. I cannot consistently do the right things without ultimate success. There will be pitfalls, fluctuations, and plateaus as my body adjusts and changes, but ultimate success is guaranteed. And that really helped me because I learned this even from my mother when I was a kid. Your weight plateaus when you're losing weight. It fluctuates up and down. You could go a week and actually put on a pound or two. If you're just looking short term, no further than the tip of your nose, then you're going to get discouraged. But when you stand back and see the big picture, you will succeed. Your body's just adjusting and you stay the course. So you consistently do the right things. You must succeed. You have to.
It's a given. That's wonderful. I like that. I haven't heard it put like that. I like that.
And then one other one, and I know I've shared this with you in the past, Glenn, is the idea, and this is not original with me from a book I read, fall in love with the journey, not the destination. The real reward is the person you're becoming, not the compliments or the nicer clothes. In other words, when somebody reaches some wonderful goal, people only want to hear about the sexy things, the visible prizes they get at the so-called finish line, even though the race isn't really over till you're dead. What people don't usually want to hear are the things that cause the success, the day-to-day disciplines, the details. So don't fall in love with the kudos of being lean and healthy. Fall in love with the lifestyle it takes to become a lean, healthy person, and then you're going to sustain it for life.
Beautiful. Russell, this is great. Any other mantras or affirmations you wanted to share?
Several of them you and I have spoken of, and I know that you've interviewed other clients. There's a handful of them. One of them I learned from you interviewing a lady that worked at a bakery, and she still lost weight and did really great because when she would look at all that stuff, she would say, "It's not my food." Not my food. And that was a mantra for me. I'd see some greasy thing advertised on TV or drive past a fast food place. Not my food, someone else's food, you know?
That's great.
Yeah. Another one I've had is due to no longer eating at night, there would be this mild hunger. And I would just say, emptiness in my stomach leads to fullness in my life.
Right.
That was another one. Another one, Jesus actually said this right out in Luke chapter 12. He said, life is more than food. When you grew up like me and food was the happiest thing of your life, the main bright spot, life is more than food. Once your life becomes more interesting, all the allure and pleasure of food sure, it's good to have pleasure out of a really good, satisfying meal, but it's not all there is.
I did not know that the first 4 decades of my life.
Oh man, me either. I didn't know it the first 6 decades. Here's another one too. This is sort of two mantras that I put together, connecting with a semicolon that I got from a couple books. Exercise is an aging body's best friend. Muscle is the true fountain of youth. That really, really helped me because people seem to think that fat loss is all there is. They just want to lose weight. But muscle tone and strength is vital because it's supposed to be that way. That realization, the body was designed where the muscles need to be strong and toned for the person to be healthy. It's supposed to be that way. And I know you can relate to this, Glenn. Sometimes a word or a phrase will jump out at you and you live in the energy of that for weeks or months or years. And just the realization it's supposed to be that way. It just kind of became a North Star for me.
We're supposed to be active and lean and strong.
You use the word exercise around someone that's had problems with putting on a lot of weight and obesity. It sounds like something burdensome, like a chore that they don't want to do. But the body was made for movement, and the body really loves to move. Why do people love dancing, or going bowling or stuff? The body loves to move. So you just got to recover that love. Find an exercise that you love so it'll be fun for you and sustainable for the rest of your life, and stick with it.
I love it.
Here's another one too. While exercise is necessary for physical fitness, when it comes to fat loss, I put my faith only in dietary discipline, self-control, eating fewer calories. And there's a couple of subpoints. One of them is exercise burns fewer calories than we think. You know what I'm talking about. Somebody says, well, I'm going to go ahead and eat this entire pint of ice cream because I'm going to work out tonight.
Yeah.
an individual workout doesn't burn as many calories as a person thinks. They overestimate. And the second point is we do not need to eat as much as we think. All my life, I just had this mindset that I needed far more calories per day than I really did need, and my mom discovered that in her latter years of life. And she ended up dying of multiple organ failure due to type 2 diabetes. And God bless her, but she did learn some good lessons and she passed on to me. And I remember that. And I would say one more, Glenn, and this is a mouthful, but I always had this mindset, like when I did lose weight, like I said, I'd lose 25, 30 pounds with cardio. Weight loss, for me, I would say, is a fragile, tenuous thing. And as soon as I quit killing myself and striving so hard, I'll go right back to my former weight. I'll automatically regress unless I keep killing myself. As a reaction against that, I just came up with this little paragraph that I would read to myself. And that is, I am not expending great energy to work against my nature and do something I hate. I'm expending normal energy to fulfill my true nature and identity. I am a man who loves to eat whole natural foods, who eats just enough per day to sustain a weight below 200 pounds, and who loves his chosen exercise plan. I'm eating and living the way I truly want to. I did not go on something like a diet only to go off of it later. I've made permanent lifestyle changes. Therefore, I'm now at peace with food.
Wow.
You probably recognize the familiarity in a lot of these things because I'm kind of parroting things that I've learned from you.
But you're saying it in a different way, and you've kind of expanded and enhanced it for your own personal meaning. It's really powerful, and given your success, I think that it's really worthy of everyone paying close attention. So I really appreciate you doing this. I just wanted to say one of the ways that I learned to encapsulate the insight about relying on your dietary rules more than your exercise to lose the fat was that you cannot run a bad diet.
Yeah. Go jogging all you want, but you can't outrun your fork.
Right. That's what you say it. That's part of how I got fat hiking all the 4,000-foot mountains in New Hampshire. I kept thinking, well, just hike for 12 hours. How could I possibly gain weight today? I could eat whatever I want to. It's not true. It burns some, but it's not a panacea. You still have to be careful.
For sure.
Russell, is there anything that I should have asked you that I didn't ask you?
No, sir, I can't think of anything. I just want to thank you for being a great friend and mentor over the years. I appreciate you. I do apologize, Glenn. Sometimes, like when you asked me for an example, I have to admit this was more difficult for me to prepare for than the first 2 interviews we did, simply because at the time I did those, the weight loss had happened so recently. Everything was fresh on my mind. And now that it's just a natural way of life, my mind isn't really filled with all these constellations of thoughts and ideas. So
that's what everybody wants, is to really get to that point where you're not thinking about this all the time and you're just living your life.
I'm so thankful for all you've done for me and the training, to be a weight loss coach and things like that.
You're very, very welcome. Thank you for your vulnerability and interest and perseverance.
And that brings us to the end of today's broadcast of Defeat Your Cravings, hosted by Dr. Glenn Livingston. If you'd like to find out more about the products and services Dr. Glenn offers to help you dramatically reduce your cravings and stop overeating in 90 days or less, please visit defeatyourcravingscoaching.com. That's defeatyourcravingscoaching.com. Thanks.